Dr. Hinds, Brother Ogunseye at a recent public meeting made certain statements that they have been a furore over in the hours and now days after that. What are your thoughts concerning what was said? Maybe put it into
Well,
context
first,
for you.
yes, first I would like to say that the furor is not over simply Brother Takuma's statement. It is over the WPA's intervention. And let me explain what I mean by that.
Talk to us.
After careful study of the developments in the last 3 years, the WPA made a studied decision to take to the streets with public meetings. And we wanted to do a couple of things in those public meetings. We wanted to signal to the government that its behavior over the last 3 years of assaulting the opposition and its supporters economically and politically, psychologically, and otherwise is unbecoming and should be challenged in a serious way with a serious political statement. We felt that we needed to let the PPP know that we are going to go directly to the opposition communities and to tell them that in the spirit of self-activity and self-liberation, it's the communities themselves that will have to put a stop to what the PPP is doing. So we wanted to shift the focus away from the leaderist politics and to embrace the Rodneyite position of self-activity for self-liberation, to tell people that you have to, in your own communities and your own human spaces, put an end to this runaway train by the people. So we wanted to make that clear. And we wanted to say to the PPP that this belief that because there are no big eruptions in the community and no big demonstrations, that you can go into opposition communities and do as you feel. And that, no, we want to, in a serious way, put an end to that. And so therefore, we started by announcing a campaign of civil disobedience and non-cooperation. We felt that in the circumstances, while we await elections and all those things that will come along the way, that we need to put our people in a state where they are able to resist in a way that will not expose them to the spitefulness and the dangers of the people. And so therefore, we announce civil disobedience and non-cooperation. It's an old tactic, old political tactic. It was used by Dr. King in the civil rights revolution. It was used by Mahatma Gandhi in India. It was used in Guyana by the PPP after the 1973 elections. It was used by the WPA in 1979. And so we are not introducing anything new. We feel that we have to say something to people to lift them and to get them to realize that ultimately it's not leaders that stop oppression, it's people. And in the process of doing so, we wanted to change the narratives as they relate to the armed forces. I think it has become commonplace in the opposition circles to condemn the police and the armed forces for doing the biddings of the PPP. And I think we are correct, because the PPP has been using the armed forces for political purposes. We have seen that time and time again. And so we wanted to alter that narrative to say they are rogue policemen and women, they are rogue people in the army, but the majority of people in the armed forces are ordinary brothers and sisters, the majority of whom come out of the African Guyanese community, which has been bearing the brunt of government attack. And so police action from the Henry Boy's incident on the west coast of Demerara, to the police action in supervising the demolition of people's property at Linden, Moko Arcadia, Georgetown, Success before that. We wanted to signal to those police men and women that they have to separate themselves from the rogue elements in the army, and that they are our brothers and sisters in the army and the police. And Brother Tacuma was tasked with articulating that aspect of our message. And basically, he was saying that the police and army must not turn their guns against people in the community fighting for bread, for justice, and for liberty. Because civil disobedience and non-resistance means that we are in resistance mode, and that legal and lawful resistance must be allowed in Guyana, and that the PPP is depending on the armed forces to prevent citizens from engaging in legal resistance and protest. And we wanted to say to our brothers and sisters in uniform, you are there to protect the constitutional rights of people, not to join the government of the day in attacking those rights of the people. And so therefore, we wanted to say to them, do not turn your guns on the people of Guyana. Do not turn the guns on your sisters and your mothers and your brothers. And we feel that if we are allowed to carry out our peaceful and lawful protests against this government, and that the government does not have the promise of the police to shoot down protesters in the streets, we feel that we will be able to bring this government to its senses. That if they don't have to rely on the army and police to shoot down protesters on the streets, that we will bring them to an halt. We will bring an halt. We will bring a stop to what they have been doing. So it is in that context that Brother Tacuma says that if the police and army were to do the right thing, that is, do not turn their guns on the people, our struggles against the PPP will be over in short order. So we are not talking here about some violent policing. We are asking the police and the army to fight for us. No. If police and army fight for you, that's a military coup. We are not calling for a military coup. And if the police and army fight for your rights, then tomorrow they can come and say, give me back the rights, I fight for you. All we're asking of our brothers and sisters in uniform is, do not turn your guns on us when we fight for our rights and our liberties in Guyana. That was Tacuma Ogunseye's message, and WPA supports it. And those who want to interpret the message differently, we say more power to you, but that is not going to stop us from saying that the people in uniform are our brothers and our sisters. They have a constitutional right not to turn their guns on the citizens of this country, and then they have a cultural and moral right not to turn your guns, brother.
Apologies there, Dr. Hinds, for the interference. Largely, you believe that what Brother Ogunseye said was misinterpreted.
That's right. And let me explain why we think it was deliberately misinterpreted. This government has been trying to beat up on opposition supporters, beat up on African Guyanese, and to get us to be quiet, to go along with the beating up. And they've been fighting the Constitution and telling us that, look, we're going to settle all of this at election. Let us have an election, and we're going to do it democratically, and so on and so forth. And they wanted to get the opposition tied up in this thing about election being the way you solve problems in Guyana, while they are taking advantage of people. WPA rejects that view. We are saying that elections are important. We want elections. We want democratic elections. We want elections where people are not bullied and forced to not to support or associate with opposition parties. Because that is what the PPP has been trying to do, to scare people away from opposition parties and opposition protests and opposition resistance, and to tell people that, look, we are going to settle this thing at election. We are saying that you cannot be bulldozing people's homes and tell them about elections. You cannot be bulldozing people's businesses in front of the hospital and then tell them they're going to solve it with elections. You cannot be having extrajudicial killings whereby members and elements associated with the police force and in the police force are killing our young men. You cannot be unfairly distributing oil resources and then tell us about election. In effect, what you are telling us, look for crossover votes, try to win an election, but in order to get the crossover votes, you cannot talk about your hurt. You cannot talk about your sense of victimhood, your feelings of victimhood. So you're saying to opposition supporters and African Guyanese, take your blows, take your blows. But what you should do is try to win some crossover votes to see if you're going to win the election. But if you don't stop complaining, you're not going to get crossover votes. WPA rejects that. We say we want both. We want crossover vote, but we want justice for people of African descent and other supporters. And we're not waiting on an election for justice. We cannot wait on an election for justice for Quindon Bacchus and Orrin Buxton and Peter Headley. We cannot wait on an election and crossover votes to come to get justice for those people's homes who have been bulldozed in Linden and more businesses in Georgetown. We cannot wait for crossover votes in order to deal with the problem of the way in which the resources are not equitably distributed. And so we are saying a struggle has to be on two fronts. On one front, we have to struggle for free and fair elections with a clean voters list, with biometrics, and with people not feeling fearful to associate with the opposition. We want elections because we want to vote the PPP out of office. And so we in the WPA support elections. But we also say simultaneously, as we struggle for elections, we have to struggle to ensure the dignity of half of the electorate. We have to struggle to ensure equitability of distribution as far as resources are concerned for half of the electorate. We have to defend half of the electorate against their homes being demolished. And so therefore, for us, it's not one or the other, is both, and we have to do them simultaneously. The government, the PPP, do not want us to expose them. No, they don't want that, because that is going to have a bearing on the election. So they want us to take blows and say nothing and wait at the election to get some crossover vote. And so what the WPA has done in 4 meetings is to change the political equation. That is why from the head of state to the head of the state armed forces, the private sector, and unfortunately, some of our brothers and sisters in the opposition, what they are doing is that they are giving comfort to the PPP, but both don't gonna fall, because the equation has now changed. The PPP can go into black communities. That's their business and that's their right. But from today, they must know that when they go in there, they're not going in there to engage slaves. They're going in there to engage human beings with dignity and with history, most of whom are not their friends and do not support them. And so from today, because of the WPA's intervention, where we have alerted our people that they have to stop taking iPads, that when the PPP goes into our community, they go there and they have to treat our people now with dignity, because at least one opposition party has made it clear that it is not going to be business as usual. We are not talking here about violence. We do not have the capacity for violence. The capacity for violence lies with the people, right, with the state and the government and the vigilantes of the PPP. We do not have the capacity for violence. What we do have the capacity to do is to warn the agents of violence that if you come into our community and want to shoot us down, we are going to resist it. We are going to resist it.
Dr. Hinds, Dr. Hinds, you've had some commentators, and whether in the press or on social media, who have said that the PPP's condemnation is very selective. And part of your statement issued by the party on the 11th of March, just yesterday, recently rather, pushed back against what the AG had put out on the very issue we're discussing. And part of that statement reads, the AG belongs to a party and government that have waged political and economic war against the African Guyanese community since coming to power in 2020. Mr. Nandalal's declaration that that charge cannot be proven demonstrates how tone deaf and racially insensitive the PPP is.
Yes, and that is an excerpt from the WPA statement. Yes, look, Mr. Nandalal and the PPP are very quick. If they don't disagree with you, they tell you you are violating a law and we will lock you up. It's Brother Rickford, or you, Brother Duncan, or the young men and women from Golden Grove, or the PNC activists in Lethem, they are very quick to incite law enforcement against people who stand up for justice.
Robin Simon?
Miss Robin Simon from Golden Grove. And they're coming up with fake charges. But the Attorney General and other PPP leaders are inciting, politicizing the police to bring these political charges against opponents of the PPP. They're trying to do the same thing here with Tacuma Ogunseye. And so therefore, when Nandlal begins to talk about the law, he himself does not obey the law. He does not obey the law. As Attorney General, he cannot and ought not to be directing the armed forces to become politically involved. And so when the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, Mr. Best, says that the army and the armed forces are apolitical, he's a little wrong there. Only people can be apolitical. An institution can be apolitical. The institution is a political institution. The armed forces are an arm of the state, the coercive arm of the state. They are political. What they should not be is partisan. What they should not be is partial. And they should not be partial to the government or the opposition. And so Mr. Best ought to be pointing his fingers not just at opposition people for inciting racial division. He ought to be pointing his fingers to every one of us, including the PPP. Because, as he said, the army and police are impartial. And impartiality means you must not speak for one side. And that statement resembles a PPP statement. He ought to retract it and to say, I am speaking to all Guyanese organizations, including the government, that they ought not to engage in racial incitement and to make a value judgment about statements made by a member of an opposition party. He has crossed the line. That is not the job of the head of the army, to determine who is racial or who's not racial. He's not a sociologist. He's a police. He's a member of the armed forces. He's leading the armed forces. He will be concerned about defending the territorial integrity of this country. He should be concerned that if there is civil disorder and the army has to get into it, then the army has to do so in an impartial way. And so we want to call on Brother Best to say that nobody is asking the army and police to fight for them. We don't want you all to fight for us. We want you all to fight and defend the Constitution of this country. It gives us the right to protest. It gives us the right to resistance, and that you must not level your guns against us. And you must point your fingers, not just in one direction, but to all directions. And that is what we want you to say unequivocally, Mr. S., that you will not point your guns at African Guyanese or no Guyanese for that matter. Regardless of our political affiliation, we want a clear statement from you that you will not level your guns against Guyanese going about their constitutional business. And insofar as you put out a statement, it did not do that. It did not do that. You're not apolitical. You're a political institution. By law, by constitution, you are political. You're not apolitical, but you are impartial. And you are supposed to be impartial. And that statement was not an impartial statement because it was pointing in one direction. And we take the word seriously. And so therefore, you must make it very clear to half of this population that voted for the opposition. All of them are African Guyanese. Some are. The majority are. And you, Mr. Best, come from that community. So you are first a citizen. All the policemen and army people, they are first citizens they become soldiers. They weren't born soldiers. And as a citizen of this country, as a member of the African Guyanese community, you have a human right not to level your guns at your sisters and brothers. So as an individual, you have a human right. As a member of the army, you have a constitutional right to protect and defend all of us.